the uttermost parts of the earth for thy possession. Thou shalt break them with a rod of iron. Thou shalt dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. Be wise now, therefore, O ye kings. Be instructed, you judges of the earth.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. As I mentioned, quite a mess has developed behind me. It was like, oh, the mess is there. I gotta remember. I was remembering yesterday to straighten up, and then it got worse. So, remember, the best way to do questions is to leave them in the comments, to tell you the truth. But that is actually always there because of canceldom. because I don't get a lot of comments. So yeah, I see them. Like, we've got to vote in for John, and that's good because that's what the votes I'd heard offline were saying, John. So everyone seems to want to do John after we get to the end of this section of the Psalms. That's fine. We'll do a shorter book after, I think. Right? Well, whatever. I talk about what I may do is so pointless sometimes because I don't like to be. I don't like to talk too much about things that I don't know if I can do. Not yet. Even if it's a small thing, if the Lord will, we will do such and such. And I'm speaking of things beyond that, which, like I said, it's like, well, we can slate John. That's fine. That's fine. I don't think we're going too much ahead of ourselves on that one. All right. Psalm of Asaph. We're going to read it again. Asaph, probably Asaph, right? Truly God is good to Israel, even to such as are of a clean heart. But as for me, my feet were almost gone. My steps had well nigh slipped, for I was envious at the foolish, when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. For there are no bands in their death, but their strength is firm. They are not in trouble as other men, neither are they plagued like other men. Therefore pride compasseth them about as a chain. Violence covereth them as a garment. Their eyes stand out with fatness. They have more than heart could wish. They are corrupt and speak wickedly concerning oppression. They speak loftily. They set their mouth against the heavens, and their tongue walketh through the earth. Therefore his people return thither, and waters of a full cup are wrung out to them. And they say, how doth God know? And is there knowledge in the Most High? Behold, these are the ungodly, who prosper in the world. They increase in riches. Verily I have cleansed my heart in vain, and washed my hands in innocency. For all the day long have I been plagued, and chastened every morning. If I say, I will speak thus, behold, I should offend against the generation of thy children. When I thought to know this, it was too painful for me. Until I went into the sanctuary of God. Then understood I their end. Surely, thou didst set them in slippery places. Thou castest them down into destruction. How are they brought into desolation as in a moment? They are utterly consumed with terrors. As a dream when one awaketh, so, O Lord, when thou awakest, thou shalt despise their image. Thus my heart was grieved. Black screen. And I was pricked in my reins. So foolish was I, and ignorant. I was as a beast before thee. Nevertheless, I am continually with thee. Thou hast holden me by my right hand. Thou shalt guide me with thy counsel. and afterward receive me to glory. Whom have I in heaven but thee? And there is none upon earth that I desire beside thee. My flesh and my heart faileth, but God is the strength of my heart, and my portion forever. For lo, they that are far from thee shall perish. Thou hast destroyed all them that go a-whoring from thee. But it is good for me to draw near to God. I have put my trust in the Lord God, that I may declare all thy works. And this is, this is a thing. This is a psalm of service in many ways. I mean, because when you serve God, you may not, prosper. So there's some prosperity gospel preachers who say that's what God wants. He wants you to prosper the way the world prospers. And that's I remember hearing ridiculous examples of certain of them. Christ would drive a Rolls Royce if he was alive today or whatever. I'm sure out of context that sounds worse than it was in context, because they probably find some way to, everyone finds a verse here or there to, because the Bible is easy to manipulate. It's easy to manipulate when people are ignorant of what's actually in there. If you've read the Bible, because you can, like when I talk about the Bible, and I'll say like, oh well, in the book of Revelation, you have these two ideas, and it's almost like a Rorschach test in my mind of interpretation. So which one is it? Is death symbolic or is torture symbolic? Which one do you think is symbolic? Which one do you think God will do literally? Second death or eternal torment? Is that literal? And I wonder often, like, you think that, like, here's the one thing. It's one thing what we've received from, because traditional doctrines have a lot of strength in our culture, and they are the assumptions we approach the Bible with. But as someone who studies the Bible seriously over time, I get I'm a little bit skeptical of people who studied for so long and still, you show them the Rorschach test and they can only see the old lady. They can't see the young woman. You know what I mean? Like, or, you ever see anything where it's like, oh, what do you see? An old woman or a young woman? And there's two pictures there, right? And so I think the same thing about the eternal torment of Revelation. It's like you see the idea of eternal torment, but also the idea of second death presented. And one of them must be just some sort of symbolic or poetic, or because it can't both be literally true. I think this has been recognized for a long time. You can't both have literal eternal torment that is based on like a conscious entity. I mean, you can have, but it's easy. I've done it many times where I've talked about how that, in a symbolic way, you can, just as people spiritualize death, I can spiritualize eternal torment. And it's not hard. And there are many scriptures that we have to deal with to do all that. And so also it's like, so I feel like that's it's like a, what do we see? Now I'm remembering how that tied it, because I felt like there was a Rorschach test here, and I'm like, what was it? Like a Rorschach test is those ink blots where they fold them in half, and I'm not saying that that's a thing, but what I'm saying is, like, sometimes I feel like there are interpretive moments where it's like, it's that way on purpose. Like, it's ambiguous to some degree on purpose. And I think that purpose is to look into our hearts. Because I do think what is in our hearts matters. And that's what this psalm is about. It's like, God cares about what's in our hearts. Jesus said that nothing going into a man defiles him. It's what comes out of him, because out of the heart comes forth murders, adulteries, etc., blasphemies. Our hearts are what need to be purified, as the psalmist says, as Asaph says. A clean heart. And he says, I purified my heart in vain, right? And we got through all this part where he just laments all their prosperity, right? And then we talked yesterday, about his feeling of like that this is all in vain. I washed my hands. I wonder if that in innocency is the right translation, because it seems like I've cleansed my heart in vain. I have washed my hands uselessly. Like I expect that to be the word, but in innocency. But in if I was to leave it as it is, I would just interpret that very simply as innocent of the fact I did it thinking it was something useful. I was innocent of the idea that it was complete waste of time, like in vain. It was useless. Washing my hands of filthiness is useless. Because the wicked have everything. They prosper. Because caring about things that are those details of life and making yourself upright and considering others and all that stuff, there has to be a kind of a tunnel vision of looking for success to truly achieve great success and achieve great riches. Without God's blessing, that is. Without God, with or without. I mean, sometimes there's luck. And that could be a stand-in for God's blessing or God's will, in a sense. We call it luck because we sometimes can't explain what we can't explain by our own actions. We often attribute to this nebulous thing called luck, which is fine because I don't have a problem with that word, because it's things that seem unlikely that come up. Like when you choose a number at a roulette wheel. I've never played roulette, but I've seen it played a gazillion times in a movie or something like that, right? You choose a number. When that number comes up, it's a factor of luck because the chance was so small. There is no such thing as luck as like some sort of force or like attribute, But my original teacher, Arnold Murray, used to say, the harder you work, the luckier you get. And that's true. And then the harder you work, not necessarily hard though, but the more you work. You don't have to work hard. You just have to work smart. I'm not always like, hard. I like hard work, especially physically challenging work. But there's other kinds of work that are hard that I dislike. And so, it depends. It depends on the, things can be taxing. But it's most important that we work. It's not, you can, when I say hard, I mean in the sense of taxing or unenjoyable. I mean, I like challenging and interesting work, even if it is physically taxing. Certain kinds of mentally taxing work, I think, grieve me a bit. Like I never really much enjoy taxes, but who does? But some people, maybe they do. I don't know. Everyone I've ever encountered who took the accounting degree wishes they had taken another one. It's like a young man I knew, he told me he was going to, I'm like, really? Because I didn't think of you as like, you don't seem like a boring person. That's a boring profession. It's not, I said, everyone I talked to who took that didn't particularly like doing it. But again, you don't have to, well, the funny thing is I could see myself kind of enjoying that and almost thinking like, I wonder if I should have taken that. Because in a way, it's a very simple thing to get paid for, to look over numbers all day and make sure they're in line and enter them and move them around or whatever. Organize them according to, make sure everything balances. It's all arithmetic. It's not what we're talking about. I don't know. So then he talks about how he goes in the sanctuary. He realizes that the riches of the rich and the blessings of all of us, in some ways, can be a slippery slope if we're not careful. Gifts can be misused. Every kind of gift can be misused. As far as the natural gifts, of intellect, of physical strength, the gifts allow us to work and to earn things and to be clever. I'm not thinking so much of the gifts and calling of God. I'm just thinking of natural gifts. That could be, but that they are, the natural gifts we have. I thank God for my natural gifts. The things I was gifted with as when I was born. Not necessarily the gifts of the Holy Spirit when I received Him. That is different. But, nevertheless, they still are gifts. In my reckoning, because God is the giver of all. He gives me my very life and my soul. He made me who I am. My existence itself is a gift that I can never repay. So, everything on top of that makes me prosper, that makes me have any advantage in the world, I count also as a gift of God. But I can misuse those things that God has given me, whether they be gifts of my person or gifts of my station. We might be born in a wealthy country or born in a wealthier family or born into a situation where we get the upbringing that drives us towards wealth. A lot of times that is the fact, is like, because sometimes people, with immigrant families and parents, they have high expectations and they place them on you, and they earn money, and you go out and you earn all this money. You're like, what's the point of it all? Because it's like, when people live in poverty and they come from poverty, they're like, you need the money, be secure, because they look at the prosperity of the rich and they think, if we only had what they had, the money, we'd be secure. There's only security in a sense in the world. Everything you have that you think of security is fairly secure, right? But even the money you save, people are watching their savings of assets to not keep up with that one. When we're talking about over 8% inflation this month, or last month, or whatever, incredible numbers like that, on top of the numbers from the previous months, it's like all you gotta do is not just look at the pump. Just go anywhere and see how the price is going up. You know what I'm saying? But so the idea that you're securing your money, it's like they can so badly pull the rug out from under us through mismanagement that savings become, So I told people, I'm like, I have piles of steel and iron and cars and stuff. It's like some of those things I have long looked at as an investment, because I'm like, there'll be more when money is worth less. They'll be worth more. Though absolutely, in a sense, they're always worth the same thing. The point is, though, if I didn't need the money, why, if you don't need money, why turn your things that aren't money into money at a time when money is kind of in flux? It's not a good time to cash in your, like stocks aren't money, but they have a value of their own. It's like if you had been holding them, it's like there's a value that's going to accrue with the inflation because they're not themselves money. You just got to make sure it's not something that, I'm not here to give financial advice, but make sure it's not something that's going to be at the certain things I'm sure are more or less inflation durable. Certain things are going to weather inflation better than others, different financial instruments. Okay. Anyways, but we look at the prosperity and we get too uptight about money. It's nothing wrong. Like I said, as I give that advice, obviously I think about it. I think about money, and I think about how people can be wise with it. Because you don't want to just I can't give advice that I don't take. I want to give advice you can't just go throw yourself out there with no plan and no money. Then we can tell sometimes. And God does supply beyond, we don't always know. Jesus talked about the guy who went to build a tower and didn't plan ahead. Okay, guilty. But but still, he is kind and teaches us and merciful. At least that's my experience. God is very merciful to me. And so I can testify of that. And people who complain, oh, God is not doing, I was like, I'm a little skeptical. It's like, yeah, I felt that way sometimes too. It's mostly because just my plans didn't align with God's plans. And so his heart was grieved. I was pricked in my reins. He means in the sense of of regret of how I was so foolish and ignorant, like he says in the next verse, right? When he thought about his envy of their prosperity and their money and all that stuff and their popularity, it grieved him in his heart. He felt grief, like, I was pricked in my reins. My inner reins is often for the kidneys, the internal organs. It doesn't matter the actual function, but it means, you ever get sick to your stomach because of something not food related, like you know what I mean, like nerves or anything like that? Well, that feeling, when they talk about being pricked in the reins, they're talking about feeling it down in your organs, down in the kidney zone, or whatever. Reins. We need to look that up. I really don't feel like it. I know that's not just out of laziness. I just don't think we're going to gain much, but I'm going to look at it anyways because reasons. Reins. Okay, I'll go down in my. Oh, I see. There we go. It says here, kilia. I think I remember that. A kidney. Yeah, okay. That's pretty good. All right. Why am I in Lamentations 3:13? Whatever. It just says at the top of my browser thing. Never mind. Okay, a kidney, uncertain derivation. There you go. So, it says of uncertain derivation. So there's no particular on that one. New American Standard, and as you can see how they translate: feelings, heart, inmost being, inward parts, kidneys, mind. They actually translated kidneys 18 times. Mind, minds, within. But because it talks about, again, we don't need to worry about this being literal. God isn't trying to tell you something about anatomy. That's why I say you can't think of the Bible as completely literal. It just doesn't work like that. We know, otherwise you have to insist the kidneys have feelings of in and of themselves, that they feel things. It's like, of course they do. I mean, you feel things down in your gut, down in your innermost parts. And, when they would look at a kidney and be like, that's an innermost part, like it's probably where you're feeling it. Because they didn't know. So linguistically, that's right. It's a linguistic thing. It's not like something God is saying in the Bible. It's something about the Hebrew language. I was pricked in my reins. I felt it deep down inside. How foolish I was and ignorant. I was as a beast, like some animal. Like without understanding. That's the point. He has the food. I want the food. It's my food. It's my food. No, not for you. They're all selfish or direct thinking. Jealous, envious, without consideration, without understanding. There's no planning for the future in the dog kingdom. And the closer they get to planning for the future is burying something. But we know what the Lord thinks about that strategy, right? Burying your talent in the earth. Not a strategy. That's not planning for the future. That's sort of like an instinct that could be future, it's helpful in the future. That's not a plan. And certainly not the way humans plan things. Certainly some animals do plan. Well, it's arguable whether they actually make plans or whether their instincts look like plans, like a bee in a beehive and stuff. Obviously, they're not planning anything. They all do it by instinct. They have the plan within them, written. Just as the way God's talked about the tabernacle, the men who would make the tabernacle, he would give them the understanding that they would just know how to make it. And so they did. But he said I was like a beast. In many ways, a swine, like Jesus said about swine. Don't cast your pearls before swine, lest they trample them and then turn again and rip you. Because they don't know the value of things, and beasts don't understand the value of things. They don't understand the things of God, and nor can they consider well, there'll be consequences for that in the future. For sin, they don't even have consciousness of sin. But he's speaking to his foolishness and stupidity from his own perspective. Nevertheless, I am continually with thee. Despite though, Lord, and I feel this is true. When I read this psalm, I identify strongly with this part, with the part of but I feel fool. I feel ignorant and stupid, like a beast. That I do feel that. I don't. While I often do not. I don't feel like I envy the wicked. I've been too, inoculated against that in many ways. I go watch. I'll say that, and I'm thinking, well, I'll watch out for it. I'll think, is that something I need to keep an eye on? Is that something that is a trouble to me? But I don't think so. Not that. But can I be vulnerable to it? Well, maybe so, because it's not something that I find or have had many challenges in. It could be brought closer. Never been to a strip club or a house of prostitution or anything like that, right? I used to drive past such places all the time when I worked. When I worked out in a truck. Right? But you start coming close to those places. You go in, or you get even closer than that. I mean, they're very far from me now. I haven't seen one in years. I haven't seen any kind of place like that in years, but I used to see them. And it was more tempting then, no doubt, because of the eye seeing. Not particularly tempting, I never went. But if I start going and flirting with the idea and giving it space in my mind, it can become more tempting. If we allow Satan a foothold, he will make use of that. And when we allow temptation to get a foothold, it's waiting at the door. Sin lies at the door. It's waiting for you. It's hungry. It wants to eat you up. And it will if you give it a chance. So that's why you got to be careful getting too close to certain temptations. You may not normally be tempted by it. But all of a sudden you're in a place of temptation. It's a different story. And so maybe I don't feel envious of the wicked in their prosperity. But then again, could I be made so by being brought close to a situation where I see that very starkly and it's rubbed in my face? Yeah, I could definitely become foolish and jealous and angry and resentful the way Asaph describes. Because it's just we all know there's human slavery going on. But if you were shown photos and given examples and details and saw interviews of people who had escaped from it, you'd feel much more touched by it because you were because it was brought close to you. And so also he's, nevertheless, I'm continually with thee. That's a statement of I walk with God. We want to walk with God. I'm continually with you. What's that mean? Because God is everywhere. He's right here. He's there. Isn't he always present? So we don't have to pay him any mind. Well, that's the point. He's present, so you should pay him some mind. It's we don't want to go through our days ignoring the most important person in the room. That's kind of it's not that God is insulted so much as it's indicative of your interest in entering his kingdom. Your lack of attention to the matters of his kingdom and to the king himself is indicative of a heart that does not desire God's kingdom. We have to be engaged. And in part that comes from God because he gives us that. He gives us our faith. The faith we have is not just of ourselves. It is something God. It is a gift of God. I have seen that in my life most explicitly. That my faith was built up on God's deeds, not on anything that came out of me. That God had to do things, and that inspired me to great faith, because I'm like, oh yeah. I prayed to God, and he answered. So you better watch out. You better not pout. Yes, he's coming to town, our Lord. And this isn't a fairy tale. So I take it seriously. Thou hast hold me by my right hand. The right hand is the one you put out to do. It's my competent hand, generally speaking. Though I'm pretty competent with both hands, obviously. As you get older, you generally pick up more competency with both hands. Plus, because each half of the brain controls a different hand, that's, I think, part of what enables us to do things like play musical instruments with two hands. It's because I often feel like my left hand has its own work, but it's just doing something on its own. It's acting independently from my right hand, which is controlled by an entire different hemisphere of my brain. Of course I can do that, but it takes a bit of focus to learn to divide that, and then to be able to sing. But my right hand is always engaged in a lesser task of strumming, which I think is, in many ways, for me at least, the easy part of it. But God holds us by our right hand, the hand of strength, the hand, you know what I mean? Like, I need to be led by my right hand. It's almost like an image of my powerlessness, my impotence, my inability to, to really lead my own life. It's like God has holding me by the hand. It's like I can't take credit for all I've done. People say, with these hands I've built everything. It's like, God led me by the hand. I can't. Even when people praise me about like things I've accomplished in life, my children, my family, it's like a lot of times I feel like, God held me by my right hand and led me all the way. There wasn't a lot of myself that I think that I offered. There was much to get too proud about, because God led me by the hand. It's a humble thing that says, I'm always with you. I'm like your child. You still lead me by the hand. Even though I had some foolish thinking. I was envious of the wicked. I looked at it and I envied them. I was looking at them and I was like, oh, the prosperity, they have everything. There's they have all these it's like, what's the point of striving to be righteous? This is the point. Are you serious about life? Do you want to live? Well, get serious about righteousness. Get serious about the things of God. Because people who don't care aren't going to live. They're not going to be part of God's kingdom. Thou shalt guide me with thy counsel, and afterward receive me to glory. There you go. Receive to glory. That's talking about resurrection. It is sown in dishonor. It is raised in glory. I don't know if that's raised in honor. It is sown in. It's a word, not humiliation, ignominy. It is sown in. I'm trying to remember what was the contrapoint on that one. I forgot. It's okay. I know it's something like shame or ill repute or something like that. I forget. But anyways, it is the body that we shall be is raised in glory. It is sown in corruption, among other things. In dishonor, corruption, all the things, our body is going to fall apart. But when it talks about receiving us to glory, that is a hopeful statement. That God, by his counsel to us, is guiding us to a destination. And that destination is glory with him. That we should partake of his glory. That we could enter into his glory and be received there and accepted as sons, as heirs. This is not that we literally are, but by adoption, so become the sons of God. And that's what God's counsel does. We listen, we give heed to the words of Christ. That's what I say. We say believe in Jesus, okay? What did he tell us to do? That's important. You say you believe in him, you should, if you haven't even read a gospel in your life, I don't know. A lot of people take the words of their religious leaders, like in Catholic Church. They never encourage you to read your Bible, but only to listen to them. Though they do read the Bible. I always remember they would read from the gospel every weekend. It's a heck of a way to take it all in. But, there you go. It's entirely insufficient as far as I'm concerned, but I don't know. It seems like the system is set up, the religious systems, including not just the Catholic, but it's set up to leave you pretty much in the same state as the guy who buried his talent in the earth in the parable of the talents. Kind of like, I have nothing to say for myself. I was just, I kind of was afraid, and I didn't do anything about my faith. All right. Whom I have in heaven but thee? There's none upon earth that I desire besides thee. You. What is it I desire in heaven? Why do I want to go there? You know what I mean? Is it the virgins? Is it the snacks, the donuts, the buffet? Is it the buffet in heaven that we crave? Is it a number of virginal sex slaves? That's such a weird thing. But I mean, what I'm saying, I don't think the two are that far off, though. It's all the cravings of the flesh. What are you talking about? Why do you want to go to heaven? What do you want? No, just go, the cravings of the flesh. Well, the cravings of the flesh is not a bad thing. When my flesh longeth for thee. He even says that. My flesh and my heart faileth, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. He's the one that brings our flesh to life. He's the one that gives us life even now. The life we have. Who do we have in heaven? Is there somebody we want up there? Ultimately, it's God. I mean, I hope that is, it's not to say that your loved ones aren't important to you, that you want to see them in glory. But because he is that branch to which the Gentiles would seek, as it was written in Isaiah. To which shall the Gentiles seek, and his rest shall be glorious. My flesh and my heart faileth, but God is the strength of my heart. Though the things we may seem to fall apart, and I know I have I'm an exceedingly limited person. Sometimes that's a good thing, I was thinking I got it written on my arm, self-limiting. Because I wanted to remember something I wanted to say in a potential side study, which I don't know if I will do or not. But which I have said I was going to do to one or two people, and I was going to say it earlier, but I'm not going to say it anymore. Because again, I have to actually do it. It's better to just do and say, here it is. I'm much more a fan of that, saying do and here it is. That's why I say I don't mind putting John out there and say, because I've been doing this daily Bible study. It's no brag to say we're going to do a Bible study tomorrow. It's just hopeful expectation of what's normal. It's not some big change. We've been, we're, 852 or something of these? That's cool. I like seeing big numbers like that. I can't wait till it's 1,000. We've done 1,000 hours of studies. Yes. 1,000. And who's heard them all? It's okay. You take it at your own pace. I was, like I said, I imagine the way I like to listen to radio, I think that there probably would be an appetite for 3 hours a day of this, unless you're sitting there and watching. Our will, our heart represents spirit in a certain sense of if you say someone lacks heart, I take all those little idioms and stuff. That's how I understand what this means, because that's exactly how it's being used. You have to look back linguistically and think about it, because it's obviously, the heart we understand in scientific terms as an organ. But I want you to understand the heart in poetic terms, because that's the terms that they're writing in. So then you can get the ideas they're trying to communicate to you. They're not trying to communicate facts about the organ called the heart, or facts about the organs called the kidneys. That's not what they're trying to do. Asaph is a poet. So understand his words in that context. Just like with the facetious speech about the wicked are so they have everything's great for them. It's wonderful. It's best to be the wicked. I mean, they profit so well. They're just profiting, really. They're laying up for themselves Though your flesh fails, God will receive you to glory. He will raise you up. That's why you can say, is my portion forever. When you make God your portion, you have forever to look forward to. But they don't. That's a big difference. And until God has set eternity in our hearts, it says. The man has this longing for eternity. And I definitely see that. Some people think, oh, no, it'd be boring, blah, blah, blah. It's like, I don't know about that. Evil, but he's running for mayor. And I'm like, that's kind of, it almost seems like bribery, right? But what I'm saying is, like, I see something like that. Maybe it's out of the goodness of his heart. I don't really understand all his motivations, and I'm not judging that person. I'm not even going to use their name. But someone could do something like that. And it could be just purely for personal gain. But it's not obvious. Just like there are cheaper ways to win people over. Oftentimes, just throwing money at people is not a great way to win them over. But the Romans practiced that when they did the bread and circuses things. Free food and free circuses for the masses to keep them entertained and fed. And sometimes that's all people care about, is they got their food and they got their entertainment. They're content. And except, contentment with those things, with the affairs of the flesh. But I will never be content until I declare all the works of God that he has given me to declare. I have to finish the works that God has given me to do. Contentedness should come from those things which we ought to be content in, that we ought not be covetous over riches, clothes, other things. The things